Lovely conversation I overheard regarding layoffs and terrible HR people.
Yesterday I took my mother out to lunch for her birthday and had the pleasure of overhearing a horrific conversation from the person seated directly behind me. They were talking with their friend about an upcoming round of layoffs at their company. This outstanding lady said she worked in HR and was going to be in charge of the selection process, and she was absolutely giddy about it. She kept bragging how she was going to manipulate things to ensure anyone she didn't like in other departments got the axe, and how this was her chance to get back at those she perceived as having wronged her in some petty way. She didn't care about anything other than her petty revenge. Her friend thought it was hilarious. They were planning to stalk the profiles of their victims and enjoy the heartbreak.
Why are HR people such absolute scum? Imagine being happy and excited to ruin the livelihoods of people but take away their stability to provide for themselves and their families. Maybe karma will happen, and after this round, she will end up redundant in a second one that she isn't in charge of. Anyone else have HR person from hell stories?
HR person from hell story. Had an HR person learn they were giving raises to warehouse workers at the end of the year and press the managers to give write-ups for being so much as 5 minutes late to justify lowering their planned raise. According to the managers, it was a non-issue since the work still got done. Power really goes to people's heads. Same HR person mostly spent their day coloring BTW.
HR person from hell story. I worked for an oil field company as a clerk. I did AP, benefits, payroll and expenses. My direct superior was a lady about 20 years older than I. We'll call her Lana. She did R. She was an absolutely horrible human being. Constantly prying into my personal life, putting me down, and blaming me for things she had done. One day, I faxed something to corporate and I had forgotten to write something specific on the cover sheet. Lana grabbed me by the upper arms and shook me hard and yelled in my face about forgetting to write this thing. She left dark purple bruises. I wiped her spit off my face and went back to my office. After Lana left for the night, I went into the district manager's office and told him what happened. He contacted HR at corporate.
I got the next day off while they discussed what to do. HR called me at home the next day and told me that Lana has seniority and you need to respect that. I worked there for another 2 years while I looked for another job. Lana continued to verbally and physically abuse me. Because HR said she had that right.
You really need to anonymously call the company in question and threaten to escalate up to giving the story to the local press if they sound like they are brushing you off. Sometimes Mama Karma needs a little hand. I took time off work to help my mom during brain surgery. I had 5 weeks of PTO and I used it all. HR said they had to relocate me because I was gone for so long. I work as a retail manager and I lost years of work that I put into my store. I hired everyone at the location and it was outperforming all stores in our district. I bonused off of sales targets and the new location they sent me to was in a dangerous neighborhood. Had 1/4 of the staff required to run that location. Was not meeting any of their sales metrics. I appealed to HR several times. An HR lady said during our last convo, I really can relate to what you're going through. My mom broke her ankle last week and I now know how hard it is dealing with a sick parent. Unfortunately, we're still relocating you. The new store was also 40 minutes away from the house I own. That person shouldn't be in HR. There are rules around mass layoffs, and not only is that super SHTTY but could give the people who laid off a lawsuit. If you know anyone in the company, you should let them know how layoff selection happened. I briefly dated someone like this. And her rationale was that she was abused as a newbie. And couldn't get revenge on the people who abused her because they were still her boss. So she abused those beneath her at first available opportunity. Her desire for revenge at all cost was the driving force in her life. It never even occurred to her to end the abuse below her, or to otherwise get out of the situation where her abusive boss had control over her. Some people are just evil like that. Not a specific person, but I called HR once to report my manager for sexually harassing the girls at the store. Ages 16 to 22 mostly. And they literally never followed up with me, so I called them back a few weeks later because nothing had changed. They told me they had resolved it, but later found out my store director backed him up. So 2 months later he sexually assaults a new female manager. They did not fire him and sent him to a different store. So he can continue to harass minors there, I guess. Anyway, don't shop at Albertsons. HR person here. This is disgusting. I've had to be involved in layoffs twice in my 36-year career and cried for days after. This is individuals and families losing their income and benefits. How can this be anything but a tragic event? If your heart and soul aren't fully focused every damn day on making your employees' lives better, get the hell out of HR. The HR lady at my previous job was an absolute nightmare. It was a small company of about 500 employees. And everyone had a story about her acting completely insane and unprofessional. My manager got fired without cause and sued her for discrimination, which meant HR lady got to keep her job but couldn't fire people for looking at her sideways anymore. I truly believe that when she finally dies, hundreds of people in the Seattle area who she wronged will be throwing a party. Sad you didn't hear the company name. You could email all workers via LinkedIn and let them know you overheard a happy HR lady looking to do layoffs. My friend got glandular fever. Managed to WFH most of it. Only took 2 actual days off for it. HR tried to fire her for taking 200 days sick. Idiots didn't realize it was a typo until she yelled at her direct manager, "Don't you think you'd remember if I'd been missing for over half a year?" Then they fixed it. Idiots. When I was about 22, 5 years ago, I thought I wanted to go into HR. Then I learned more about HR. I have zero urge anymore. I don't want to end up like that. Don't trust anyone in HR. HR workers actively side with businesses over labor, and should be treated as class traitors. I was called in for an HR chat, having tampered with the "Where should our company summer outing be?" SurveyMonkey poll. Figured out that multiple votes were possible. Put the same snarky comment in each vote so as to make my votes recognizable plus easily discarded. During this process, it was made known to me that one of the mid to high-level HR reps had commented, "I bet this was myself. He's been on my shish T list for a while now." Some unexpectedly serious investigation plus paperwork resulted. Spun as some sort of threatening environment to employees, eventually blowing over with a memo in your permanent record holdover. When given a copy to sign, I hand-wrote that based upon HR employees' backroom commentary about my being on her shish T list. I harbor significant concerns about my future career path plus treatment. Inkle. Benefits adjudication. The HR VP commenced a second investigation. Clearly displeased that word had gotten out concerning the shish T list, and less than thrilled to be questioning her own subordinate. I stayed at the job for 5 to 6 more months, interviewing all the while. Figured the ground was pretty much scorched there. Whatever I did, as a security engineer, it's my job to probe things for weakness, had saved me. But my boss had received his own disciplinary write-up for trying to cover for his people, and the lingering memo could be used as ammunition for whatever they wanted in future. My only consolation is that HR shish T-list lady quit almost immediately after her own investigation, and the VP was replaced maybe a year thereafter. When the witch hunt culture surfaces, it's time to get out. Never trust HR. An HR person was at weekly meetings to discuss my job. I wondered why she and my manager were actively trying to agitate me. Wasn't until over a year later, when I was applying for unemployment, did I realize why they were trying to upset me. If you get fired for being racist, sexist, or homophobic, the fired employee is not entitled to separation pay, which I was entitled to over a year's worth of wages. Luckily, I'm not the type to get angry or upset very often, so they failed in getting me to call them names. After the first of their meetings, I spoke to a lawyer, who sent the company a letter saying to cease harassing me. They laid me off soon after they received that letter from my lawyer, paying me what I was entitled to. HR isn't there to protect the employee, they are there to protect the corporate culture. Someone I know studied to be in HR, and during her internship all she had to do was dig up dirt about a pregnant person so they could fire her when she came back. I've been super fortunate. At my last few jobs, I was fortunate enough to interact with great HR people who took their job seriously but had heart. I've had the opposite experience as well. I hope I never have to deal with heartless HR people again. I wouldn't say all HR people are scum. I worked in HR right out of college. It was like a 50-person department, and I specifically did benefits, insurance, short-term disability. I quit after 2 years because it was way too stressful for what I was getting paid. They weren't promoting me like they said they would. And all of my teammates were catty middle-aged women who all hated their jobs, lives, and each other. I always advocated for the employee and helped where I could. But doing disability, I often had to give reports on who was out of FMLA and things like that for directors to discuss terminations. I always felt terrible after those meetings. Some people just don't care, unfortunately, or are numb to it after so many years. I work in a completely different department now, and it's so much better for me personally. But please be aware, not all HR personnel has anything to do with the firing process, and a lot of us are trying their best to look out for their coworkers. At my company, it's really up to the person's manager on if they get fired or not. This person is really an example of someone on the extreme end of bad HR worker. And there's assholes in every department. In my long experience and as sometime victim of HR, I believe it's because they have no skills. Nothing else in the company that they could do. So when your main skill is snark and petty revenge, those are what you use at your job.
If you enjoyed this video, please check out our playlists full of similar content. Epicaricast is like doom scrolling for your ears. Please like, share, and subscribe.